What is going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Good News on GoodVue. GoodVue News. I love it. I love it. But today we have a special guest on us. We got Pastor Jeff Seabury. He's here with us. And then, of course, we got the man, Lee Kanter, who's always a blessing. And today we have a very special show because of the fact that the content of the show is really genuinely about how God is moving in a relative way, consistent with His Word, and what He's really called us to be as people of action, people who make a difference. And so this is crazy that it's not everybody's story, but for us who, and I'm going to start off with this, but for us who live in America, we have the privilege of voting.
Yes.
And it's wild to me that in 2024, this is not everybody's story. But the reality is we live in a country where we can vote. And when I think about relativity and I think about how God called his people out of, or Abraham out of his father's house and gave them responsibilities. And there was a point where, and it's so amazing, there's a point where the people said, hey, we want a king that we can see. And God allows that to happen. Instead of saying, no, I'm your God, I'm your king, he allows them to operate in the way that they think is best. And he allowed Adam and Eve to operate in the way they thought was best. So it's interesting to see how God is interactive with us, but not oppressive. He is okay with watching us make decisions. And so, but then he tells us to do things like disciple the next generation. He tells us to speak the word. You can see where those of us who will listen, he has a distinct word that we're supposed to be careful with one another, how to respond to this, how to respond to that. So where a lot of people would think God is distant, he's actually interactive, but he says things like, my children hear my voice, and so discipleship is such a massive part of Christian culture, kingdom culture, biblical culture, Hebrew culture. Discipleship is a big deal. And when we live in a country like America and we get to look at our education system, I was blown away when I realized, wait, our education system was separated from discipleship, and then this discipleship became the spiritual thing to do, and education became like the logical, intellectual thing to do. And really, it was all a part of discipleship. And so now we live again in a generation where we're seeing our young people falling apart. A lot of times it's because they don't know who they are as a whole person, spiritual and education-wise. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
And I'm seeing that people are saying things like, our votes don't matter. And I'm like, well, if it mattered biblically, what people thought, and God even set back himself and allowed people to have the freedom of thought, even if it was against his own will. You know what I mean? He would say, I give the pathway of life and goodness and death and evil before you. Choose life. But he would allow people to make their decisions. And we live in a country that operates that same way, that allows us to make decisions.
Well, this election coming up, a big issue is public school education and what are they teaching our children? Parents are upset, and they want school choice. They want the ability for charter schools, home schools, Christian schools, and they're upset with a lot of the issues that are being taught in the school. There's gender fluidity, and that came up when Brett Baer interviewed Kamala Harris on Fox News. And so, Pastor Jeff, tell us a little bit about Bridgeway Christian School and your vision of educating our children and how that should fit into this modern
world. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for having me here today, and I think this is like a real, genuine, discussion that we need to have because when I'm looking at it from the child's point of view, um, we've had children that came to families that came to our school, Bridgeway homeschool, Bridgeway Preparatory Christian School, where their story was my child was bullied or my child was confused by some things that were happening actually in the class. Even going to the restroom, simple things like that. And so they've come to Bridgeway, and I appreciate their honesty, and but I see their pain, and when they're looking at their children and they see their child confused. And so at Bridgeway, we seek to establish a safe place, a place where a child could come in, and what our mission is to take the whole child and help the whole child, not just academics. That's a very important piece of what we do. But we're looking at character. We're looking at building character. We're looking at the spiritual aspect of it because God is the foundation of everything that we do. And unfortunately, with public schools, that's just not
Right.
the separation of church and state doesn't allow for that to happen. So we are looking at some of these children, and with all of the polarization right now, the political polarization that's going around, the children can be impacted negatively with that. So we try to make this a safe place where they could come and they can be themselves, and they could grow in their character, and they could live to their full potential and go out to be strong young men and women that will be world changers. And that is really what our goal is. We want them to be a world changers, and so we start that at a young age, from kindergarten all the way up to the 12th grade.
Yeah, and when I look at when I hear us older people look at the young generation, well, what happened to the young people? What happened to the kids? It's like, well, what did we allow to influence them? Did we speak the word of God into their life? Did we promote education over spirituality or character development? How interactive were we as mothers and fathers to the generation beyond? Did we do things like, I only care about my kids, and versus taking care of a community? These are the questions that we have to ask ourselves before we just judge a generation and say, oh, it's the kids. That's literally impossible for it to just be the kids. You know what I mean? And so I think that especially after COVID, when the young people kind of saw how we as men of God, as moms and dads, as the school, as the political world, as they saw how we handled that, like, did we give in to fear? Did we make big government, God in a sense? Did we trust the government more than God? They watched how we responded to all of that.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
The government, though, has inserted itself in early childhood education, and middle school and high school, and taken out the 10 Commandments. So, they've taken God out, and something has filled that space.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
what's filled that space is the woke, agenda, and agenda that really a lot of parents have a problem with. So, the great state of North Carolina and several other states, are using voucher programs to help support children come to your school. Right?
Yes. The North Carolina has the North Carolina Opportunity Scholarship Program, and I could tell you, we're at a place right now where there were more kids and families that qualified for the scholarship than there were funds.
Wow.
So that tells you the importance of what are the mindset of
Yeah.
the parents that I got to get my child into a safe place. And so unfortunately, in North Carolina, many of the kids that qualified were not this year be able to actually get the scholarship, because it was just so many. It was like a record number. This year was a record number of registrations and qualifications for the program, but they just ran out of money. And so that's how you could see the importance.
But the homeschool community is growing so fast that the Christian private school community is getting stronger. There is literally a exodus happening, because once parents finally got the message that their children were not safe. And this is what's so amazing, is that parents were able to identify that their children were not safe. And because of brave men and women of God, such as yourself, answering the call, who opened up schools, and private schools are privately owned schools. So God put it on people's hearts to open that. I mean, that is profound. And it reminds me of Jesus when he says, if you would listen to me, hearken to me, I would take you like, a mother hen does her chicks and cover you. You know what I mean? And that's the heart of God. So, when I think about the effectiveness of the people of God, it's going to exist in the political realm, in the education realm, the medical realm, not just the church realm, but in all facets of reality.
So, tell us a little bit on your wife, Lynn, man. She runs a great ship. And I said, okay, Lynn, homeschool's grown. What's going to distinguish your homeschool? She said, we teach our kids self-esteem, self-confidence to go out in the world, and the whole, child approach, the biblical basis of their spirituality and morality. So tell us a little bit about your vision for how, Bridgeway Christian School and GoodVue are working together.
So we are, and this is a real blessing for us. We have the opportunity to work with GoodVue and to partner with GoodVue, and with this extended partnership that we have with GoodVue has just really opened the doors for us. I think of how Jesus said, "If I be lifted up from the earth, I'll draw all men unto me." And we see that dynamic beginning to happen at the school because this is our foundation, and then the vision of being able to give homeschoolers an opportunity to connect into the classroom virtually, and not only that, but to be able to build cohorts around in communities for the homeschoolers to be able to actually come and sit into a facility that's available through our partnerships with churches and pastors. So these are the tools through being connected with GoodVue that are allowing us to be able to open this door for families to be able to walk in. And I was just talking to Lynn this morning, and I told her, I said, I have this thing on my heart about the kids that were affected in Florida and Georgia, where they're not able to go to school, and we're looking to see if we can do an outreach even to them, that even if it's temporarily, for them to be able to reach into our classroom, to us as a hub, to be able to come into the classroom until they get their, till things come back online. So those are some things that it's like soon as we connected with Duke and with GoodVue, the vision just went like this.
And
it keeps going.
Let's explain to our listeners what the vision is. So Pastor Jeff and his wife Lynn at Bridgeway Christian School have a Google Classroom, and they can connect via Google Classroom, and students can hear a live teacher via Google Classroom whether it's a single student in their own home
Yeah.
or a group of students in a church somewhere, a hub that are connected to Google Classroom, and they can go to school, Bridgeway Connect, via the internet and learn and get personalized attention and hopefully, like you said, cohorts of children in churches, and we can work with churches to really take back the education and give people who can't afford it, a private school education, who need someone to watch their kids because they got to go to work, try to get around some of these logistical barriers.
Yes. And that's the beauty of it, to be able to, as we develop this and as we put this together, we are really looking forward to testimony from parents that we will be able to share with you and how things are developing. And so this is the good news about this. And I'm telling you that God is just doing this great thing. And we're looking forward to, expanding this across the nation.
Well, then that's really the opportunity that we were just joking about technology earlier, but that's really the opportunity that technology gives us, which we all know and have experienced. That's one of the reasons why the enemy will try to fight us so hard on technology. But, we're stubborn. So and we know
it's going to be accredited.
It's right.
Oh, yes.
And it's going to, your students, they do better on the standardized test.
We're well above the standardized test. Yes,
so we're talking high quality moral education in a physically safe environment and in an environment where there are children being taught spiritual values that their parents stand for, and we're not letting the government insert its views. This is important, folks.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's an important issue in the election coming up. So when you go to vote, think about this. Now, we got to move on to this next subject.
Yeah.
It's our news show.
Well, and I was. It's so funny that you moved to that segue, because I was going to say, when I look at Netanyahu, when I look at him, right, and I see this well-balanced man who is extremely educated, also a warrior, also very much a man of God. You know what I mean? And it's like that's just shows you what God can do with the whole person. So when I think about Bridgeway, I think about what our children becoming like that, where they're warriors, where they're educated, and they're also spiritual warriors for the kingdom of God. So Lee, take us away.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Netanyahu. Obviously, just this big week, because going into election, we've been encouraging to vote, and just think, is your country better off now than it was 4 years ago, and where do we want it to be in 4 years? So we got a war rage in the Middle East, and Sinwar, who was the head of Hamas, which means violence. Hamas means violence. That's the Hebrew word Hamas translates violence. Was killed by the Israeli Defense Force. He's the one who planned and instigated or created this attack and killing a year ago. This is exactly a year ago, at the time of Sukkot, which is the Jewish holiday we are in this week. And he was killed this yesterday, because we're taping this on Friday, October 18th. He was killed yesterday, and we're going to play a clip from Netanyahu right now where he speaks to the Israeli people about this.
I stand before you today to inform you that Yahya Sinwar has been eliminated. The person who committed the most terrible massacre in the history of our nation since the Holocaust, the mass murderer who murdered thousands of Israelis and kidnapped hundreds of our citizens, was eliminated today by our heroic soldiers. And today, as we promised to do, we came to account with him. Today, evil has suffered a heavy blow. But the task before us is not yet complete. To the dear families of the hostages, I say, this is an important moment in the war. We will continue with all our strength until the return home of all of your loved ones, who are our loved ones. This is our highest commitment. This is my highest commitment. And to the resident of Gaza, I say, Sinwar ruined your life. He told you he was a lion, but in reality, he was hiding on a dark den, and he was killed when he fled in a panic from our soldiers. His elimination is an important landmark in the decline of the evil rule of Hamas. I would like to say again, in the clearest way, Hamas will no longer rule Gaza. This is the beginning of the day after Hamas. And this is an opportunity for you, the resident of Gaza, to finally break free from its tyranny. I call on everyone who hold our hostages. I call on whoever lays down his weapon and return our hostages, we will allow him to go out and leave. And in the same way I say, whoever harm our hostages, blood on his head, we will reckon with him. The return of our hostages is an opportunity to achieve all our goals, and it brings the end of the war closer. To the people of the regions, I say, in Gaza, in Beirut, throughout the entire region, the darkness recedes and the light rises. Def, Hania, Sinwar, Nasrallah, Mohsen, Akil, and many of their associates are gone. I'm calling you, people of the region. We have a great opportunity to stop the axis of evil and create a different future, a future of peace, a future of prosperity in the entire region. Together, we can repel the curse and promote the blessing. Now it is clear to everyone, in Israel and in the world, why we insisted on not ending the war, why we did insist, in the face of all the pressures, to enter Rafah, the fortified stronghold of Hamas where Sinwar and many of the murderers hid. I would like to express my deep appreciation to the IDF and Shin Bet fighters and their commanders for their determined and courageous action. There are none better than them. Today we clarified again what happened to those who hurt us. Today we once again showed the world the victory of good over evil. But the war, my dears, is not over yet. And it is difficult, and it exacts heavy prices from us. I wish to express my condolences from the bottom of my heart to the families who lost their loved ones. I want to hug the families of our fallen heroes. Their supreme sacrifice, including the last few days, brings us closer to victory. As King David said, I will pursue my enemies and destroy them, and I will not return to their end. Citizens of Israel, we are in the resurrection war. Big challenges are still ahead of us. We are required for long patience, for the unity of the ranks, for courage, for a firm stand. Together we will fight, and with God's help, together we will win.
So you've seen in that clip, Netanyahu says this is an opportunity for peace. And he's asking the Hamas soldiers to release the hostages, lay down the weapons, and create a new future in the Middle East. And, you know, in the context of Sukkot, and he even said in there, you know, that this can be, instead of a time of war and violence, this can be a time of festival.
Mm-hmm.
So what's Sukkot? Sukkot's the festival of tabernacles, or the ingathering. And, you know, the ingathering in a physical sense is harvest, but in a spiritual sense is harvest of all people, all believers, all nations, all tongues. We, GoodVue, is a ministry of reconciliation, yes. Right? Mm-hmm. And so the really interesting thing is, you know, in Sukkot, they build these little tabernacles. They eat in them, even sleep in them, to remind people that what life was like in the wilderness when they were wandering, how vulnerable they were, the elements, and how God provided. He provided manna. He provided water. He provided quail. He provided protection. And God Adonai Yireh, he is our provider. But the really interesting thing is the Haftorah, or the prophets portion that's read, is when Solomon's dedicating the temple and brings the Ark of the Covenant into the temple, and God's Shekinah glory comes in. And I want you to look at 1 Kings 8 in your own time and read it. It's beautiful prayers Solomon delivers. But listen to what he says, because I think this is a good message for the peace that Netanyahu's talking about. 1 Kings 8:41, a prayer of Solomon on dedication of the Ark of the Covenant in the temple. Likewise, when a foreigner who's not of your people Israel comes from a far country for your name's sake, for they shall hear of your great name and your mighty hand and of your outstretched arm when he comes and prays towards this house. Here in heaven, your dwelling place, and do according to all for which the foreigner calls to you, in order that all the peoples of the earth may know your name and fear you, as do your people Israel, and that they may know that this house that I built is called by your name. So our prayer is that there would be an opportunity for peace.
Yeah.
One Jewish nation where Palestinians, Arabs, Palestinians, Christians are treated like what's called Ger, Toshav, resident aliens, because they believe and they want the favor, and they have all the rights, and they have a better life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it shows the consistency of God's desire to reconcile mankind. When I think about him taking Abraham out of pagan culture to build a nation to himself, like we said earlier, it's all for the glory of God. And so when you look and you go, wait a second, God has really given us an opportunity to come out of this war against him, because he said, my spirit will not always contend with flesh. And so ultimately, when we look at our different nations, different cultures and things like that, there's a battle between the spirit and the flesh. And it's better for us that we are discipled, that we are educated in the ways of God, because the earth is the Lord and the fullness thereof. So walking with God doesn't mean we don't have to learn math and science, and and walking with God doesn't mean that we are not warriors and won't go to war to protect our families and children in our nation. Right. And walking with God doesn't mean we'll just allow any leader to rise up and not participate in our God-given rights to vote. Mm-hmm. So walking with God, absolutely, on every level of relativity, has responsibility to it.
It's interesting because the very next verse is of 1 Kings 8. After what I read, it says, if your people go out to battle against their enemy by whatever way you shall send them, and they pray the Lord toward the city that you have chosen, this is Jerusalem, where the temple was, and the house that I built for your name, then hear in heaven their prayer and their plea and maintain their cause.
Yeah.
So, and in Netanyahu, in that clip that we played, says this is a battle of good versus evil.
It definitely is.
And my question is, what side of this is the United States going to stand on?
Right.
Because, those who bless Israel are blessed, those who curse Israel are cursed. A two-state solution isn't a solution. It's a recipe for another war in the future. People have to come together under the one God.
Yeah.
And every knee shall bend.
Yeah.
Right? And that's just his law.
Yes,
it is. Yes.
And if you want to see this, if you want that truth that he just spoke for your children, make sure you contact Pastor Jeff at Bridgeway Connect, because that's exactly what we're raising our children to be, as whole spiritually, education wise, and to understand their responsibility as children of God. All right, we're out of time, guys. We love you very much. See you next week.